Welcome back to the channel, my friends. Warhammer Man Studios. I'm Warhammer Man, and today we're taking a look at the Warhammer 40,000 competitive tier list. This video is sponsored by CMO Games. More on that later. Warhammer 40,000 Metawatch, Sisters of Battle Triumph in Tampa. Around 300 players descended upon Tampa, Florida last weekend for another major Warhammer 40,000 tournament. The action at the Tampa Open was fierce, and eventual winner was well deserved. Congratulations to Jeffrey Kalodner for winning the whole thing with his force of Adeptus Sororus. He was joined on the podium by Jack Harpster's World Eaters and Eldari from Quentin Johnson. Stu from the Warhammer Studio has once again sat down with the Warhammer TV presenter Nick to discuss what's up. So we're going to go ahead and skip over that video. It's a little less than 30 minutes and it's pretty redundant. It's basically just a lot of them patting themselves on the back and telling them how great a job they did balancing Warhammer and how everything is fixed now. Which, if you believe their Metawatch stats, is basically true. The story of the show was the winner, who battled through late-night shadow rounds, and 3 players who have already qualified for the World Championship of Warhammer. Alright, so here we see his Adeptus Sororus list, and I'm pretty familiar with the sisters. This is a pretty much cookie-cutter list. It's not too crazy. He's not leaning in like super hard on any one thing. It's just all the good stuff from sisters, just all put together. So right off the bat, we've got Morven Vol. She is really good. She's going to end up with a squad of Paragon Warsuits. We're all going to have multi-meltas. And then a mix of blades and maces. And then we have St. Celestine. We have Junith for the free command point. And then we have one Palatine with plasma pistol and an Imagifier with the litanies of faith. So 5 total characters and definitely all strong. One really nice thing about the sisters is even Morven Vol and St. Celestine, like the strongest characters, are still like right at 125 and 135 points. Junith gives you a command point every turn for 90. And if I'm not mistaken, she's the cheapest model in all of Warhammer 40k that gives you a command point, which is obviously very strong. But yeah, 460 total points on those 5 characters. And then for battle line, we have 300 points, and it's pretty basic. It's just 3 Sisters of Battle squads. Each has a combi weapon, a power weapon, a melta-gun, a multi-melta, and a simulacrum imperialis. So pretty standard loadouts right there. And then we have for dedicated transports 230 points, and that is 2 immolators, one with twin multi-melta and one with the twin immolation flamers. All right, and then the other data sheets category is 905 points, so a little less than half the army. So we see only 1 retributor squad with a combi weapon and a power weapon, and then 4 multi-meltas. So that is a 115 point squad. And I believe this is just an error right here because it should be 1 retributor superior and then 4 retributors with multi-meltas. But obviously very strong. And then we see 2 castigators. Castigators are awesome right now. I think a lot of people are overlooking them. They don't have the best AP, but they can seriously dish out damage. They are very, very reliable. And in my opinion, at 140 points, they're pretty much auto-include. Now, I know a lot of people are taking the Exorcist for the indirect fire, but the truth is, after it got nerfed, it's just really not worth it. The amount of damage it actually puts out is very close to 0. As where the castigators are going to reliably dish out a bunch of damage throughout the game. All right, and then next we have 2 mortifiers. So they are single mortifiers with the anchorite sarcophagus, so the +1 save. They're nice pieces, they're durable, they're 60 points, they can just go upset the game. And then we have Morven Vol's Paragon Warsuits, all multi-meltas, and the mix of blades and maces, very strong unit right there. They die fairly easily, but they are like really strong offensively with the rerolls from Morven Vol. And then we see a Seraphim squad. It's 70 points. They deep strike. You got a plasma pistol and a power weapon on the Seraphim Superior. And then you get 2 Seraphim with 2 Munistorm hand flamers each. So you end up having 4 of the hand flamers in the squad. And of course, with the 12-inch range now, you can drop in and still shoot with those. And then of course, you can attach Celestine and the Gemini to the Seraphim squad if you want. And then we have 1 Sisters Novitiate squad, plasma pistol, power weapon, sacred banner, simulacrum, and 2 flamers. And then 2 Death Cult Assassins, 35 points for them. They're super cheap. They can kind of go do their own thing. They're small, easy to hide. They could potentially kill something if they need to. And then, of course, we have the Kaleidos Assassin. Very good now, 90 points for her. She can put the CP tax on your opponent if they have a stratagem they're planning on using over and over again. You can, of course, make that cost 1 additional command point per use. And then she's really great to just pop up where you need her for like scoring secondaries. So we see overall, there's a lot of characters. There's a decent amount of armor in here. It's a relatively mobile list. It has the command point buffs. It's got something like 11 multi-meltas plus like the castigators and all of their heavy bolters on top of the battle cannons. It's just overall got the ability to do quite a bit of damage. And if you're not familiar with sisters, they have two main dynamics that you're going to be using, which are the miracle dice, which you're going to be picking up extras of throughout the game, especially with this many battle sisters sitting on objectives. And you're going to be able to substitute those dice in advance to a roll. So sixes are extremely powerful because you're going to be able to have an invulnerable save on everyone. And then, of course, these sisters are also going to get buffed throughout the game as members of their units die. So they get +1 to hit when they're below full strength, and then an additional +1 to wound when they're below half strength. So as you kind of tune up these squads, if you're not picking them up off of the table, the ones that are left get stronger and stronger, or more efficient, more effective. So a very nice army right here. We don't see it leaning in like too hard on any one aspect. Obviously, there's a ton of multi-meltas in the list, but with the exception of like the Castigator battle cannon, that's really all like the heavy weaponry that sisters have available to them. They don't have like your typical las cannons or any of the fancy new Space Marine weapons. And even though multi-meltas are strong, you're still going to be wounding your toughest vehicles on 5s. So you really need the volume of fire to bring down some of the more durable enemies. But as we have seen some changes to towering, and then also some kind of like debuffs or point modifications for knights, a lot of the hardest matchups for sisters are kind of going away. But the most important thing you have to remember with sisters is that most of them are toughness 3 with a 3-up armor save and 1 wound, as opposed to like a Space Marine, which is toughness 4 with 3-up armor save and 2 wounds. So they are definitely a glass cannon. But no doubt this is a nice army, and it was very well played to take home first place, and congratulations on that one. This is a direct reflection on how much more diverse and playable the field is as a whole as a wake of most recent balanced status slate. Jeffrey took out several extremely strong players and powerful factions on the way, including Eldari piloted by Quentin Johnson, the highest current win rate army, in the hands of a very well-rated player. He then defeated Jack Harpster, currently considered one of the best players in the world. So yeah, he basically put the smackdown on 2 of Art of War's best players, probably more than that along the way. All right, so here is Jack Harpster's World Eaters. So not a ton of data sheets to choose from for the World Eaters. The main factor you're going to see is either with or without Angron, and are you spamming Jackals or not. So in this case, we have Angron, Lord Imbocatus, 1 Lord on Juggernaut, and then 1 Master of Executions. So 790 points worth of characters. Obviously, Angron tips the scales pretty hard. And then for Battle Line, we're going to see 1 Jackal squad and 1 Khorne Berserker squad, 10 in each. And that's going to be 270 points, so very, very shy on the battle line. And then we have for dedicated transports, we have 1 Rhino. And then we see where the majority of the points are, the other data sheets, aka 8-bound. So in this case, we see 1 3-man squad of 8-bound. Then we see 1 6-man squad of exalted 8-bound. And then 2 more 3-man squads of exalted 8-bound. And then we see 2 units of 2 chaos spawns each. So I do also have World Eaters, and this is a pretty common list right here. Again, there's 2 main builds right now that we're seeing for World Eaters. One is a ton of Jackals, and then the other is a ton of 8-bound. And then it's kind of like with or without Angron. So big fan of this list. It has a pretty low model count. It's pretty easy to play, fairly durable, hits hard, and there's nothing cooler than bringing your big red dead Primarch back to life multiple times throughout the game. So very cool list, and congratulations on 2nd place, Jack. Now a quick message from today's sponsor. CMO Games has been selling Games Workshop products online for over 20 years. They carry the full line of Games Workshop products, including Warhammer 40,000, Age of Sigmar, Necromunda, Blood Bowl, paint tools, and more. Almost all Games Workshop products are priced at 15% off MSRP. CMO Games takes pre-orders for most Games Workshop products released at their earliest date possible. 12:01 a.m. on Saturday, they go live. Most of these pre-order products are also priced at 15% off MSRP. CMO Games offer free shipping in the US 48 with an order of $50 or more. Their customer service is top-notch, and they ship most orders within 24 hours. Visit CMOGames.com using the affiliate link in the description and let them know that you heard about CMO Games from Warhammer Man. Now, back to the video. On top of that, there was a welcome amount of faction diversity at the Tampa Open, another sign that the new edition of Warhammer 40,000 is coming into its own following balance changes. So I don't know why Games Workshop can't actually share any of that stats with us. They basically just give us the stats they want us to see. And the truth is, anybody that's ever used statistics or studied statistics knows that you can basically just twist them around to say whatever you want. So in this case, with 60,000 games recorded since the balanced data slate came out, current faction win rates are looking very even, with just a few factions outside the 45 to 55 window. All right, so this is very, very important. So this data was collected since the balanced data slate came out. And then we see at the bottom here, it says data correct as of the 17th of October. So this does not take into account any data collected prior to the balanced data slate, only since then, which of course makes sense. but they don't specifically say anything about participation rate or anything like that. So I would really like for them to actually include not only the faction and then the win rate, but also how many games total that army participated in. So if we have 60,000 games and there's 2 armies per game, there's a potential of 120,000. So I want to know, were 60,000 of the games with Eldar in them? Did orcs do really good, but there's only 1,000 games with them? You know, we have no idea, and it makes it very, very difficult, because if you don't have a nice rounded set of statistics with like high participation rate for all the different factions, one really good player can completely skew a faction's results. So that being said, we know for sure that Games Workshop is going to manipulate the data in any way they can within reason to make the game seem like it's in a better place than it is. Now, that being said, I actually think the game is in a pretty good place right now. But here, if we look at the chart, we see Eldari still on top with 57, just outside the 55 window. And then we see orcs at 56. So they are actually just outside the window as well. And clearly saw some nice improvements. Then we see Leagues of Votann up at 54%, which is absolutely insane because they were completely terrible, one of the worst factions prior to the balanced status late. Then Chaos Space Marines at 54, Tau Empire at 53. Again, Tau were like in the low 30s, and now they're at 53 suddenly. Then we see Black Templars, Chaos Knights, Deathwatch, Thousand Suns, Chaos Demons, World Eaters. The Deathwatch one kind of jumps out at me here as they saw some pretty heavy nerfs to like their stratagems. And then also they got hit pretty badly from the Space Marine nerfs as well. And because the Deathwatch have to use the Deathwatch detachment to be able to use like any of their special units or anything, they don't get any of the benefits from all of the new Space Marine detachments. So very surprising to see them not go down at all. And then we see Thousand Suns, Chaos Demons, World Eaters, Adeptus Mechanicus. So we know Adeptus Mechanicus was like at the bottom of the list in the low 30s, and now they are suddenly at 50%. And I know what you're thinking, very, very suspicious. But I mean, realistically, if they jumped up for 50% from like the low 30s and they're about to get their codex next as well, they're probably going to be in the 70s before long. And then we see Death Guard have been pulled up from the bottom there. Space Wolves, Adeptus Sororus, Gene Stealer Cults, Dark Angels. Surprised to see Dark Angels only at 48% because they are pretty strong. Tyranids also at 48%, definitely surprising. Necrons, all 3 of those are pretty strong armies. Adeptus Astartes obviously saw some pretty big hits, losing the Oath of Moment reroll wounds and also some of the other nerfs, but they got their new codex as well. And then we see Imperial Knights went from one of the top factions to basically like the lower end of the range or right in the middle. So I think the changes to the towering keyword were crucial, but now it seems like the points maybe were just a little too much. And realistically, the reason I think Imperial Knights are at the bottom and Chaos Knights are at the top is because of like the spam war dog list, where it's just tough to take out like 13 or 14 war dogs. And most of the people running Imperial Knights are running some of the big knights, as where you typically see like the 14 war dog Chaos Knight list. Then we see Astra Militarum still down here struggling at 46, Grey Knights at 46, Adeptus Custodes taken from all the way near the top to all the way near the bottom. I think the main thing they need to change right here is the Custodes had basically like a shrug against mortal wounds. And when they made the changes to devastating wounds, so it was no longer counted as mortal wounds. So I think all they need to do is just say that the shrug that they have is for mortal wounds and also counts for devastating wounds as well. And then we see Blood Angels all the way at the bottom. So we see people are still playing the Blood Angels because they are included on the list, but they're just not that good. And then finally we see Drukhari all the way at the bottom, the only one outside the range on the low end at 44. So after seeing this faction win rate, knowing that 60,000 games have been played, but having no idea how many of those games any of these factions participated in, it's tough to tell how real or accurate these numbers are. I think overall the game is in a pretty good place. I've definitely been enjoying myself, had some very fun, very competitive games. I overall like 10th edition. I've been really enjoying it. And as long as Games Workshop doesn't go crazy and start making like sudden insane changes or releasing completely broken codexes, I have a feeling like 3 to 6 months from now, we're actually going to be in like a really nice place. So assuming all of these statistics are true and they haven't been too heavily skewed in one direction or another to fulfill Games Workshop's agenda, I'd say they did a pretty good job overall. But that being said, I wasn't born yesterday, so some of these seem a little bit off. If we just jump back over here to the previous one, and this was data collected as of the 8th of August, 2023, We see here, Eldari was at 67, Genestealer Cult was at 63, Imperial Knights were at 57, and Adeptus Custodes were at 56. So of those top 4 factions, Eldari went down some, but all 3 of the other factions that were on top here dropped way, way down in the list, basically to the bottom. So for whatever reason, all the nerfs they did to number 2, 3, and 4 completely took them out of the running, but the Eldari are still very, very strong and on top. So like a lot of us said, it seemed like they nerfed Space Marines or Deathwatch or some of these other ones a lot harder than they nerfed Eldari, which were obviously the problem. So very interesting choice. And then again, if we come down here to the bottom and we see Leagues of Votann were at 35%, Tau Empire was at 38%, Deathguard was at 38%, Admech was at 40%, and we just jump back over here, I just find it very hard to believe that Leagues of Votann jumped up by 20%, and same with Tau. But they did get quite a few changes, some points reductions, so maybe Games Workshop didn't have to get too crafty with the data, but I would definitely take it with a grain of salt. There'll be another edition of Metawatch next week, examining the state of play in Warhammer Age of Sigmar. The Warhammer 40,000 team will continue to monitor competitive play. So very cool. Let me know what you think down below. Does it seem like these stats are maybe a little too favorable to be like real life? Are you also curious how much some of these factions actually participated in this 60,000 games? Like for instance, was orcs only involved in like 100 games and somehow got a 56% win rate? Was Leagues of Votann being played by one player, and that one player is just really good, so it pushed them up to 54? Did we really see enough changes to Adeptus Mechanicus to take them from all the way to the bottom to a 50-50 win rate? And once they get their codex, are they going to be completely broken? I always like to hear your guys' feedback down in the comments. I think overall, Games Workshop has done a pretty good job here. I'm always a little biased when they nerf some of my factions or my favorite factions, but since I pretty much play almost every army at this point in time, it's almost impossible for me to dodge the nerf bullet. So special thanks to CMO Games for sponsoring the video. Check them out to save 15%, link in the description. That's it for today. Warhammer Man Studios, I'm Warhammer Man, and I'm out of here.